Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this episode of CPO series. Our webinar today will be the final part of our mini series on product ROI, hosted by Dragonboat. A little bit about this series before we get started. Dragonboat hosts webinars on a regular basis for the product community. With this webinar series, we dove into the subject of product ROI. In the first part, Sridhar Nagarajan, Chief Customer Officer at Dragonboat, explained why product ROI matters and how to optimize it with the framework of the product operating model. Following that, Denise Hemke, our Chief Product Officer at NeoGov, walked us through the methods of estimating and calculating product ROI. But today we want to extend that topic further. We want to know how everything we've discussed so far can be used to make agile business decisions, including those at the executive and board levels. I'm Alisa, and I'm a product manager here at Dragonboat, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Anna. To kick us off, we want to hear from you, and we'd love it if you introduced yourself and wrote where you're joining us from today in the chat. For now, I'll just go over a few housekeeping notes. The first is that this is a half-hour session. It'll be recorded and available on demand later with our other webinars through the Dragonboat website. If you've got questions during the presentation, please submit those in the Q&A. We'll either take them live or we'll have a dedicated Q&A at the end. And finally, as you probably know, Dragonboat is a SaaS platform that enables product leaders to accelerate outcomes. So do check us out at dragonboat.io to learn more. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Shelley Perry. With 30 years of hands-on experience across every aspect of SaaS leadership, Shelley brings a wealth of knowledge to our session today. From CEO to investor and advisor, her journey is defined by the ability to swiftly tackle tough decisions, remove barriers, and maximize value. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest, a true leader in driving SaaS success. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you. And I'm so excited when Becky asked me to participate in this series, I was excited. I have a passion around helping leaders kind of up-level to C-suite. I have a particular passion for up-leveling product leaders. And so I'm excited to kind of be the final episode in this and take the product or the ROI discussion to the next level. So what we're going to do is, you've talked in the previous sessions about ROI and the data elements, how to calculate it. And with all things, right, you've learned the basics through this and how you calculate ROI. But when we start to think about ROI in a strategic discussion in terms of business impact, it has more nuances. And I think one of the things you have to think about is its ROI and opportunity cost. And as a CPO, your role in the organization is to really shepherd the resources that you have in your control that help to maximize the value of the organization and business outcomes to the business and your customers. So through this session, we're going to do three things. We're going to talk about synthesizing and up-leveling that operational data to enable discussions at the C-suite, to get to better decisions at the C-suite and board level, which is a little bit different to your team and maybe even to the line level managers. We want to help you think about expanding your understanding of stakeholder perspectives beyond the customer. Every product leader that I know is just so in tune to the customer and kind of taking a lot of data and synthesizing it and coming up with recommendations and putting it in the customer perspective, but they don't take that same skill to their peer C-suite or their board. And while you don't want to forget the customer perspective, you really need to learn to add these additional stakeholders to your considerations and to your product operating model. And last but not least, you want to be using data to build relationships, which also builds trust and helps you learn empathy through pre-discussions, which really help those group discussions get to resolution faster. So we're going to cover that all in 30 minutes. So I'm going to talk fast and we're going to do Q&A at the end, as Alisa mentioned. Before we get into the discussion, I'm going to introduce some additional data elements, and you may get very excited about all of these additional data elements. And even as products and portfolios mature, you have a lot more features, you have a lot more things that you're able to do and data elements you're able to talk about. As a CPO, one of the things that you really have to spend more time on is taking that information, that data, and turning it into the least amount of information for the audience that you're talking to get to a better outcome. And one of my favorite quotes of this is Mark Twain, who said, "I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one." And when you don't have tools and you don't have a product operating model that allows you to quickly look at data and then use your time to prepare for discussions, to analyze it, to synthesize it, to make it smaller, to make it relevant to the audience. When you don't have tools to help facilitate, you use all that prep time to kind of create the data, and you really don't get to put your head into the perspective of who you're talking to. So one of the things that I often see with C-suites is that they don't spend that extra time in the beginning, and it's really important. So as a CPO, the first thing that I want to give you some context to my background a little bit. I started my career as an accountant, and then I became a CTO, and then I progressed to probably being one of the first CPOs before that really was the title. And because I had a background in finance, accounting and finance, before I decided to go into technology and product, I learned how to present information to specifically the finance people because I knew how they would listen to it. And one of the things that I get called in to do a lot with CEOs or boards, even if I'm not on the board, is to translate what the heck did they just tell me? Right? So I've been called into as kind of a special project to help translate, because often what happens is the CPO or the CTO walks in or delivers the information in a way that they're used to hearing it, and then it doesn't mean anything to the audience. Often the information is there, they're making sound decisions, but they're actually not able to translate it or communicate to have a good discussion. So one of the things I want you to think about in your product operating model and how you are representing that information and how you're able to participate in the table, at the strategic table, is I want you to walk in and think about when you're going into a C-suite discussion, that you need to think about what each person is thinking about and how they're thinking about it. I'll give you an example of this, but you need to have pre-discussions, and you need to present maybe roadmap items in the way that that C-suite can understand it. So you can take the same roadmap item or the same priority and have a very different discussion about how it will help in terms of gross margin. You can have a very different discussion with the CEO about how it fits in overall, because they have different words or different ways that they consume it through metrics and through storytelling. The CMO may have a different perspective. It's the same roadmap item, but you need to be able to talk about it in a way that relates to that person. And those pre-discussions become super important, because then it allows you to go into detail about how it affects what they're trying to do. Think about it in terms of customers. Now, here's the trick. The example that I always use is when my daughter was growing up. I haven't watched the latest Disney movies, but when my daughter was growing up, she absolutely loved the Aladdin movie, the old Disney Aladdin movie with Robin Williams and others. If you watch a Disney movie, the brilliance in Disney movies is that I can watch it, and a teenager can watch it, and a toddler can watch it, and they're going to take away very different things from the same scene. And so your job as a CPO to help not just update what's happening in product, but to facilitate discussions to come up with what the priorities should be. You need to be able to present the information, the least amount of information that resonates with each group. And you can't do it, but you can't have a conversation that just says, hey, let's go look at this. And then, okay, that's for you, CMO. Now I'm going to have a discussion around CPO. You have to really learn how to synthesize that information. So what does this mean in IRL, in real life? I'm going to walk through an example for you. So think about it. It's mid Q2, which it happens to be right now. It's mid Q2, and the net new sales for H1 are falling short. Now I could come up with lots of examples, but I'm just picking this one. And you as a CPO are walking into the C-suite. You're feeling good because the roadmap is there. Your plan is on target. Things are executing. You just came from an all hands update with your team and you celebrated how much everything is on target and is executing. And you should be celebrating that with your team because they're executing and that's what's important to them. Now you walk into the C-suite meetings, and you may be compelled to celebrate the fact that everything is on target in terms of delivery. But you need to pay attention to what's going on around you, which is H1 sales are falling short. Now, that could be because of marketing. It could be because of sales. It could be because of the market. It could be because a lot of things. All of our estimates, even in our product roadmap, are estimates. Sales are estimates. So things change. You need to deliver to say, yes, we're delivering to what we agreed to because that builds trust. But that should be a byproduct. It should be a very quick point. What you want to do is acknowledge, because you've had pre-discussions, that there's an air of we're not meeting the business objectives of the company. And I am part of the C-suite, steward of the business. How can I facilitate the discussion to recover H1? Because it's still mid Q2. You have time to recover H1 and certainly the year. So there are things more than likely, especially if you're in the scale-up journey, that you can do as a product leader to help with that. And you need to be able to facilitate those discussions in a way that maybe the discussion, nothing changes, but you want to be seen as someone who understands what's happening. And then you're coming up with ideas and you can have those discussions very quickly because you don't have a lot of time to give context because time is a shortage. So let's give an example. So this is a background screen using Dragon Boat, but let's say net new sales it's off track. And now you've got 3 items in your roadmap, everything else is on target. But in Q1, you were working on a personalization engine, and you were targeted in Q3 to work on CRM integration. Well, we know some things that are happening in the market today. We know that retention is a big issue. And so maybe, yes, everyone's executing, but maybe we should pull forward CRM integration. We should start selling it. It means marketing is going to have to redirect kind of the order in which they're going to launch. Sales needs to be enabled. And maybe that quickly can have an impact on the year. And it was already in your roadmap and it was there. It's just now changing priority because that is something that can help accelerate or meet that H1 goal. This is just an example, but this is a way that I have my product operating model. I'm celebrating with my team that everything is on track. And then I'm going into my C-suite conversations as an active participant in offering ways in which we can change the outcome of the business. Now, that doesn't mean I tell my team to redirect. It may be when I get out of this conversation, we say, stay the course because we can recover by the end of the year. And that may be okay. That is a C-suite CEO discussion, but you have the information at your fingertips to facilitate the discussion. If you just brought this to the C-suite and you slap this just like this, if you just slapped it up, it would not mean a lot. So what it does mean is I'm using this information as a CPO to facilitate a discussion. So I may not present it this way in that discussion because it's too much data, but I may use the information to create a summarization of a discussion, 1 or 2 slides to help facilitate it. Now, maybe, it is appropriate. It really depends on the C-suite. It really depends on what level the C-suite is, but you need the information at your fingertips so that you can have that time to have those pre-discussions and to be able to summarize to get to discussions in that C-suite. Another really good example is when you start talking about usability or UX refreshes. So many times I've walked into board meetings and someone says, we must do a UX refresh. And when we talk about product things, we may talk about it having usability impacts and all of these different things. As a CFO, usability doesn't mean anything to me, but you know what does mean something to me? Net retention means a lot to me. And we know that creating UX updates often leads to easier usability, easier onboarding, and all of those things can actually translate to different outcomes. So again, you need to be thinking about what you know should be done from a product perspective, talking to your team and your product operating model with all of the product terms. And then you have to take that same information and present it to a different stakeholder group with a different set of words and terms and things that matter to the person that you're talking to. And then you have to figure out how to actually summarize it to have a group discussion to get to an outcome. It is the single biggest growth opportunity in a career for someone making a leap from being a VP of product to a C-suite role. The single biggest area that often has to be developed. Now, let's take it to the next level, a board. I'm actually on boards. I help facilitate boards. I help people kind of when they're ready to kind of jump into being board roles. And so this I have a lot of experience with. And there's so many times where people said, I look at a board deck and the product section looks like a white paper on the product. And that's just not helpful because a board's role is to kind of help facilitate value, risk, all of these different things around a company. And so let's take that same example of having the H2 sales not on target. In May, I'm in the C-suite talking about a lot of detailed information is if we do this, then we can do this. If we do that, then this is going to have this impact, the example that I just showed you. Now, fast forward, it's now the board meeting. It's the end of Q2. It's a Q2 update, so it's going to be the month after Q2. I don't need to share all of the information that we discussed as a C-suite to derive which items we were going to prioritize or deprioritize or shift. What I want to do is give the information to the board of how it matters to them. So let's this is an example again from Dragon Boat, and it has a lot of data on it. It's really meant to be representation of different ways. So as a board member, if you're going to redirect from the personalization or the CRM integration, I don't know necessarily that those two features actually are in this product or that product mix because I am not as close to your business as the C-suite is. And so I can't remember that internal term means it's in this product mix or it's in that product mix. And so it may not matter that you deprioritized one and pulled the other one because you are actually getting sales and growth. But it may matter if it's changing the product mix that will have an impact on a major transaction, evaluation, cash planning, all of these different things. And so I need to see the result of that information as a board member in a different way, right? And this may be something that you discuss at the C-suite, but it is a way to present to me as a board member in the way that I can consume it and in my role in your company, which is to help make sure that you're maximizing value, for the customers and the stakeholders in the market. So having a lot of additional data elements and different ways to look at the same information to provide updates, but more importantly, to facilitate discussions of what if to actually get to the priority is where the return on investment in implementing a tool like this or any tool, it doesn't have to be a third-party tool, but I can tell you from growing up in CPO before we had tools, it is a whole lot easier to actually use tools that were intended to do this, so you can spend more time thinking about how to use the tool and how to present it, because building it from scratch is very difficult, because I did it back in the day. It's kind of like, when you had to walk to school, or, those stories. And back in the day, we had to hand code and develop all of these. And it was extremely difficult, but it was also something that I've always had a lot of passion for. So hopefully, the one thing I didn't go over, and I'll go back to this, is that one of the things that you have to do as a CPO is you have to understand that a board is made up of individual people. Individual people have, things that they're interested in, reasons they made investments, different areas of expertise. And you have to, the same thing that you have to do for each customer or customer persona group, the same thing you have to do for a C-suite and a board, is you have to find out what is important to those people so that you can help facilitate discussions and updates faster. And here's the bonus: by doing that, meeting with your board, if you don't work for a public company, because there's all kinds of governance issues, it is actually a great opportunity for you to network and learn when you're actually having those one-on-one conversations that help you facilitate the data. When you start sharing more detailed data, they will give you feedback, but you don't want to share detailed data to this board member that is not relevant to this board member. So it's a really great way to also increase your network and learn a lot, because the board members typically work across a lot of boards, and it's a way to get just great learning. So there's the example. So here's the key takeaways. I wanted to leave some room for Q&A, so I kind of went through the material quickly. So the key takeaways are: it's really important to engage strategically with your C-suite, the board members, and even market experts. And you really have to learn how to take all of the data that you have and create different views and different ways to really facilitate the discussion. Think about yourself. If you get a lot of information thrown at you, you kind of like, you turn off, because it's so hard to process it. And so thinking about how to present that information to that individual when you're having one-on-one conversations, and then even harder, how to then summarize it to actually facilitate those discussions to get to better decisions, is important. Having continuous visibility into the data is important. As you mature your product operating model, you are going to have so much information. And so you have to spend much more time as a CPO working with your product operations team, really thinking about how that information needs to kind of evolve and summarize. And you want all of the information for different views. But again, one of the things people do, it's kind of like when products start to evolve, the screen gets very busy and no one knows where to click. It's the same thing as you start to get more information in your product operating model. If you have the inclination to just keep throwing more metrics at the group you're talking to, they're not going to understand it. So you have to spend that time. And then you really want to use the data. I can't stress this enough. I think when we are VPs, directors, or even coming up through our product careers, the strategic objectives of the companies are already set for us, because there's been a decision over here that says we are going to, for the next year, focus on net retention, or focus on this, focus on that. Those decisions are made for you. And then you have to make sure that you're providing the updates so that you can show that what you're doing actually drives to those outcomes. As a CPO, you are a C-suite helping to derive the priorities. And so you want to use that information in that context at that time to actually help come up with decisions. And especially as major market changes, which we're going through now, you want to be able to facilitate those discussions for better outcomes. Now, does that mean you also need to provide updates? But the key to really making faster, agile business decisions is to be able to facilitate that in a way that people can consume it. So the next slide is useful resources, but if you want to get in contact with me, I've talked fast, you can find me on LinkedIn, reach out if you have questions. Please reach out to Dragon Boat. We stay in contact. So if there's something that comes up, maybe we can do some additional sessions on it. But with that, I'm going to take it to Q&A. So
Okay.
maybe.
Thank you so much, Shelley. That was amazing. Thanks for walking us through those lessons. We do have a couple of questions that have come up. Okay, so let me just take a look. The first one talks about how should I think about product operations in terms of my current role and future promotion. So it sounds like this is a question coming from a product operations professional, which, you know, in our community, there's quite a number of them. Any thoughts on that?
So it's hard because I don't know the role, but I'll just answer it. I think that with any operational role, whether it's sales operations, product operations, marketing operations, or COO, I think one of the things that you have to think about in terms of progression is the first is that you've got to make a choice if you're going to kind of go more toward data, different ways to collect data, different ways to analyze data, different ways to use AI models, all of those different things. So you start to kind of split off to being a data expert. You're spending more time learning how to actually concatenate, manipulate data. Or am I going to go more toward kind of being a business leader? And both options, like in the beginning of your product operations career, you can do both. But as you kind of progress through your career, just like a salesperson or sales ops person has to do, you want to actually decide which way that you're going to go. And how that in product operations, it might be in the beginning, you're doing a lot of, building models and collecting data, and then you're going into more of an analyst role. And then I think you just have to decide. And it's very difficult to do both. So that's my advice to you, is kind of at some point in your career, decide if you're going to go more toward staying current, because when we choose this path of career in technology and product, we have to choose to stay current in something. And so you have to decide, are you going to stay current more in the technical side of data collection or more in the business side? Because there's just not enough hours in the day to learn both.
Fantastic. Okay, we have another question. Thank you so much, Shelley. Oh, another question. What are your thoughts on setting net revenue retention goals for the product team instead of the inputs, churn, growth, margin goals, etc.?
I think that you need both. I think that it really depends. So I think one of the reasons that when we start to think about having tools, and especially with all of the advancement in AI, is that it shouldn't be either or. It should be both. And what you're actually trying to do is find the concatenation of where can I maximize resources to get just that right level of churn with that right level of net retention. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's both.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And another one, this one might be a big one. What makes a great CPO in your experience?
I think what makes a great CPO is, and I spent a lot of time, I spent almost 5 years at Insight Partners, and part of what I was doing was kind of helping, in the product area. And so I spent a lot of time trying to define this. And I think what makes a great CPO is that if I talk to someone on your team, if I talk to a customer, if I talk to a peer, if I talk to a board member, that they all have great reverence for you, and they will describe you all differently. Each one will have a different way to describe you in terms of how they view you. And so it's your ability to really adjust and deliver messages to the audience to get to an outcome. And I think that is really the main difference between, your evolution of a CPO. It's spending much more time helping people understand trade-offs and decisions in their terms versus yours.
Fantastic. Shelley, as you mentioned, tooling is a really important component of how CPOs have these conversations, how the boards have these conversations and decisions are made. So I just want to invite our audience to learn more about Dragonboat. If you're curious to understand how Dragonboat can help you make strategic decisions and optimize your product ROI, I do encourage you to sign up for our next group demo on May 30th. My co-host Anna will share in the chat a link to join us for that. Again, if you guys want to get in touch with Shelley, connect with her on LinkedIn. We'll drop a link in the chat for that as well. Thank you so much for such an informative session. So energetic. I love your passion for the subject, and it was such a great time. Thank you, everybody, for coming together for this community session again, and we'll see you next time.